hard for my results, and I need my diet dialed in. The RP Diet app tells me what to eat to keep me on track, and offers suggestions for changes based on my responses, giving me the freedom to choose my path. A personal digital diet coach for less than $15 a month? Yeah, that works.
Three, two, one. I think we're good to go. Folks, welcome back to the weekly webinar. Dr. James here with Dr. Mike as always, and we are back in the United States. Thanks for being patient with us. We are on a modified schedule this week, as we mentioned last week, because of our travel, but now we're back and back to business. How you been, Mike?
Not well, James. I've recently come to realize that most of my life has been a fraud.
A fraud? Why?
Yeah. I've just been, I can't do this anymore. I'm in the Illuminati, man. Like the real Illuminati.
Man.
I know.
I knew it.
Right? And then I just don't know because I feel like I get all these benefits, but I'm guilty, because we kind of fuck up the whole world.
But for the better? Yeah.
For our better. I mean, it costs you,
You know what I watched on the plane coming back was Spider-Man Far From Home?
Uh-huh.
Did you see that one yet?
Yes, I did.
I love the part where he's like, he gets he finally gets his moment with MJ by himself. And he's like, I wanted to tell you something. And she's like, you're Spider-Man. And he was like, what? No. And she was like, I knew it. I already knew it. And he was like, oh, shit.
Yeah, that was funny. That was really funny.
So good.
She got him.
That movie was okay, but I did like how they addressed the Avengers stuff, which was the way they did that was really funny. I wish they would have just done like more of that the whole movie.
The Spider-Man, the Captain America video about the detention.
Yes.
That's like amazing. I think was it in that movie or was it in the other Spider-Man movie?
It might have been in the other one. They had the Tony Stark like Netflix documentaries and stuff.
Yes, it's so good. I love the Captain America thing where he's like, so you're in detention and yeah, this is a time to think about what you did. And it's like, of course he would make a video like that. It was amazing.
Dude, the part where they were talking about how like when people like blipped from Endgame and then they came back, how they stayed the same age, but everyone else like went up 5 years. That like I was dying. I thought that was the funniest shit. I was like, I'm so glad they brought that up.
Yeah, 100%.
All right. Well, we got some questions.
Shall we get into it?
Yeah, it's mostly Daniel Hacker this week. Jesus Christ.
All right. And I see that Bassam is also in there. All right, let's get going.
Let's do it.
Daniel Hacker, the man that hacks, says, in regards to Mike's training compatibility video, how does frequency... Oh, sorry, hold on. I clicked on the wrong button. Fuck.
You lose it?
Yeah, I'm good. Okay. In regards to Mike's training compatibility video, how does frequency come into play with the activity that may be competing with physique? So someone does one of the more interfering activities along with their physique work, but only does it 1 to 2 times a week. Would that be equal to doing less interfering activity 3 to 4 times a week? To pick a specific, say 1 to 2 times a week gymnastics for an hour each time versus golf 3 to 4 times a week for an hour.
I think
that's not comparing frequency. That's comparing frequency and modalities. It's very interesting.
It's too vague to just look at frequency and then say like different modalities are tit for tat. You just can't do it, unfortunately. Each one would be on its own individual basis. Because, for example, even in that example, you might say golf, and you might be under the assumption that golf is minimal interfering, but every time you swing that golf club, you're going to be torquing your back, and your back just might take too much of a beating. So doing golf 4 times a week might actually be more disruptive than something else because the back might be a limiting factor, just as an example. So I don't think you can make those kind of generalities just by saying one is more or less interfering. Therefore, you could do more frequency. It's just going to be on its own individual assessment basis.
Yeah. Mike mentioned specifically about ways to mitigate interference with certain higher demand activities. I do gymnastics 1 to 2 times a week. What are some of the strategies to lessen its interference with my physique training? Well, the first one is to make sure it's kept away from interfering with physique training that's very hard. So there's parts of the week of physique training is going to require a lot of energy and a lot of joint integrity. And there's other parts like doing lateral raises and bicep curls with a cable that just don't require a whole lot of either. So if you're doing gymnastics, I would put it close to where the hard stuff is, potentially right after it. So the gymnastics not going to go all that well, but it won't interfere with the hard stuff, because after the gymnastics and when you're good and beat up, you're going to be doing easier stuff. So that's a very good start to what would be required. And another thing is to, whatever sport you do much more technical approach and less grit, much less grinding, much less volume. So it's a trade-off there, but it's nonetheless allows you to do both to some extent. Let's see what he says and what he's doing now, James, and maybe you can think of something at the end of this paragraph that he's not doing.
Yeah.
What are some strategies to lessen its interference in my physique training? So far, I don't do any of the conditioning work because to me that's too junky volume. I make sure to do my jumps onto thin mats instead of the ground to minimize harsh landings. Yeah, I would actually do your jumps onto thick mats is a good idea. I always do my weight training first in the day because that's a priority. It's a good idea. I didn't do any gymnastics training during overreaching weight training weeks. A fine idea, though you could probably do a little bit of gymnastics to keep the technical aspect high, because remember, technique degrades relatively quickly. I should also mention that the way my training is structured, my coach pick a couple moves and work on them until they're perfect. I don't do any ring or vault work, mainly just work on flip variations and hand balancing. On a side, he told me I needed more explosiveness with my jumps, coming in after 7 sets of Smith machine squats will do that to you. He tried to get me to do frog jumps in place for 4x25. I told him to go to hell. He apologized and requested 5x5 jumps instead.
Yes. So this is kind of a tough question because you don't train something so that it doesn't interfere with something else that you're training, right? You train that thing to the best ability that you can to get the best gains that you can. So it's kind of a hard way of phrasing the question, and maybe that's me being pedantic, and you can stick it to me on that all you want. That's fine. But it's kind of like, how do you fight not to lose versus how do you fight to win? It's kind of how you're phrasing the question, right? And so I think all the things that you are doing are totally fine. But at the same time, if you are overly constrictive in the way that you approach your gymnastics training, then the whole thing becomes junk volume because you're not making any progress and just spinning your wheels and not really doing anything. And then you're just accumulating training volume that's interfering with your physique training. See where I'm going with that? So it's kind of like you should have distinct goals, and maybe that might be really useful. And I think what your coach is doing is fine, where you may be picking a few movements and you're really trying to hone them in and do a really good job. But at the same time, I think maybe it might be good to kind of outline some short and long-term goals for the gymnastics training that you can start working towards. And then you can kind of structure the training that you're doing towards those goals. And then you can kind of balance how they're interfering with your physique stuff. Because otherwise you're just kind of doing random stuff for seemingly no reason. And then it's very difficult to answer questions like that. Like, how do I make sure it's not interfering with my other stuff? Well, the answer would be to just do as little as possible. But then you're just not making any progress on it either. That's the downside. So yeah. I think that would probably be a good idea to do some short-term, long-term goals of what you want to get out of doing gymnastics. Even if one of the answers is just like, I just enjoy doing this and I want to feel good and I want to feel athletic and I want to feel, not like I'm just spending my life in the gym all the time. That's fine, but just put it out there and then it's easier to answer those questions. Does that make, Mike, do you see where I'm going with that? Or
yeah,
am I just being an asshole?
You know what I mean? For sure, also being an asshole.
I know. I know.
Then he says, this is a spicy one I know you're going to like. Once again, in reference to Mike's chart, where does dance rank in terms of interference to physique training as in 1 to 1.5 hour long dance classes? Daniel, that depends highly on what kind of dance you're talking about. So the most interfering type of dance would probably be breakdancing. That's like basically gymnastics. It's brutal. Then after that, you have sort of dynamic hip hop dancing, popping, locking. Group choreographed hip hop dancing would be really intense because they bounce around all the time. And you get into like salsa, mambo, that kind of things, and you'll have some breaks and there's not a ton of jumping or anything like that. There's occasional some flipping, some holding, some twirling. And then, if you get into the more relaxed dances, all the way up into certain kinds of modern dance that are very slow and into sort of technical ballet, basically, it starts to be quite not interfering and is really just sort of like easy cardio. Although, ballet being in the sense of like, I should have said like slow interpretive dance, not ballet. Ballet is a whole different animal, but I don't think anyone does as a hobby.
I think, ballet is like all or nothing kind of thing.
Yeah.
Either you do ballet or you don't.
Or your Romanian teacher yells at you. she's not aware that she's now in a country that has civil rights for children. You know?
That just made me have flashbacks of Black Swan.
Exactly.
Sexy movie.
You're sick, man.
Yeah, I'm totally sick. But Mike, I think that was a great answer. Again, it's one of those like dance is going to be so variable. I remember even just getting prepped for the wedding. Mel and I were taking dance classes for the little crappy dance that we fucked up during our wedding.
Oh, it was great.
And then I was getting back problems just from the extra doing all the
most
dance
Jewish
stuff.
Thing you've ever said in your life.
Yeah, totally. No, I mean,
my back.
Because you move your hips a lot, and there was a couple like lifting movements where I would lift Mel and spin, and Mel can attest to this. Like the weeks going into our wedding, I was having these back issues. And I was like, dude, it's this fucking dance stuff is killing my back, and that was because I thought I could just, I was just like, oh, it's just dance, whatever. I'll just keep doing what I normally do and ignore it. No, that was a mistake. My back gave out.
Yeah, that sucks. All right. Some additional questions to my previous couple. We've covered this to a certain extent before on the topic of lat/rhomboid MRV and recoverability. Am I out of line saying if one is not doing barbell rows or one-arm rows, which are pretty tiring themselves, it feels like the MRV is almost infinity? James touched on this, although I think he was doing free weight rowing too. I'm built similar to James, and I'm tallish, 6 feet, long arms and legs. Last Meso I trained up to 24 sets, all in the 8 to 20 rep range, and definitely recovered just fine. My frequency 3 times a week. I think this is normal. I'm going to potentially try a 4-week frequency soon, probably when I'm hypercaloric, and see if I can get a few more sets in and recover just the same. Yeah, it's totally fine. It's back sometimes can be trained a lot.
Yeah, I think it's totally normal. Just keep in mind, like you might run, seeing as that we had similar anthropometry and similar problems, you're probably going to run into the same problem I did through experimentation. Was if you can move up to 4 times frequency on back, but that might limit the types of leg exercises you do just due to the overlap between your leg and back training. So you might find that 4 times a week frequency, you can't do like really heavy deadlifts or stiff-legged deadlifts, but you might be able to do something else like a 45-degree back raise or glute raise or, even good mornings or something just fine.
Yeah. Similar topic is using cable row / cable pullover to pre-exhaust the lats. For barbell rows, a good/bad idea. I haven't done barbell rows in a year because they were irritating my bicep, and now this issue is gone. I'm thinking if I pre-exhaust my lats with cable rows / pullovers, which I feel a ton, then I could use less load for the barbell. So, he goes on. Rows and potentially let my lats work harder as opposed to using more bicep and movement. Thoughts? Also, in this case, would a deficit barbell row be better than normal one? So, I'll just go ahead and say this. I don't think rows are the best way to train the lats. I think rows are the best way to train the back writ large, which means the lats, teres major, and especially middle traps and rhomboids. All of those muscles get hit really well with rows. But if you just want to zoom in on the lats, vertical pulling is usually better, right? So if a bodybuilder comes to you and he hits a rear double bicep and his fucking traps and his fucking rhomboids and teres major are just massive, James, like massive, like palm tree upper back. We're like, what the fuck? What the hell's going on back there? But his lats are kind of small. You don't have him do rows, right? You have him do vertical pulling. It very directly targets the lats. Very easy to overload. So can you pre-exhaust the lats to have them more hit by rows? Yes, you can. But, that's not something that would be immediately apparent as the first best thing to do. If you were to do that, I think doing vertical pulling before you do rowing is the best way to do that. And that includes something like a pullover, which is technically a vertical pull. Using cable rows to pre-exhaust for barbell rows just doesn't make a whole lot of sense to me. James, does it make any sense to you?
No, I have the same opinion as you on that. And I think that trying to pre-exhaust the lats before rows might just make it like one of those really shitty movements where your lats just give out right away, but you're really not getting a ton of lat stimulus either. To me, that's like a really low SFR situation where you just get a lot of fatigue, not a lot of stimulus, and then the muscles that you're trying to train, like your scapular retractors, just don't get trained at all at that point because
I have a great example of this: pre-exhausting hamstrings to and then doing lunges to focus on them. Like that'll just make you really suck at lunges and be wobbly and have cramps. But lunges don't really stimulate your hamstrings nearly as much as would be required of a movement that focuses on them.
Yeah. So I totally agree. And I think that doing, you could do potentially that same idea with vertical pulling, like a pull down or something, and that might be really great. But I don't know. And I personally haven't found the pre-exhaust on the back to be particularly useful for me. That's just me speaking. Mike, have you done that and found it to be efficacious?
Yeah, like, so I'll do like pull-ups or pull-downs, and then I'll do rows after. And that way, like, that's during a workout that's designed to really hit the lats first as a primary move, and the rest of the back is very secondary. So what I'll do is like 6 sets of vertical pulling, and then just 2 or 3 sets of horizontal pulling or rowing, right? So that really those 2 sets are just kind of maintenance work for the rhomboids, teres major, and the traps, etc. And they're still stimulative to the lats because they're so pre-exhausted. But the stimulus to fatigue ratio of rows for the lats still sucks. Like, if someone told me you had to work lats more, would I switch to rows from vertical pulling? No, I would simply continue to do more vertical pulling or pullovers. But I think that option, so it's not like when I do my sort of pre-exhaustion, it ends up being that, but it really is just like, well, I have to row, and luckily after my, I'm not going to do it first because it's not the priority today, so I have to do it last. And luckily, a cool side benefit is that the lats are hit more on the rows than they would normally be. That is not even to say that they are the limiting factor on rows or that they get a really, really good stimulus on rows compared to other exercises.
Yeah, and to me that seems more like just like a normal kind of prioritization triage rather than like a deliberate pre-exhaust strategy, which is totally normal. I'm trying to think of
like leg presses and sumo squats. Like, if I wanted to keep training my quads, I would just do more leg presses and not switch to sumo squats. But if I also have to do adductors and glutes that day, I'll put sumo squats at the end. And the cool thing is that the quads still get some kind of hit on sumo squats, but it's certainly not a maximum hit. I wouldn't design that program and be like, ooh, these sumo squats are really going to fry my quads after this. Like, no, benefit is they still keep the quads really pumped to get a little bit more stimulus. But the real benefit is I do them last so I don't fuck with my workout up, and I still hit the maintenance volume for glutes and adductors and so on and so forth.
Yeah, and if you were going to use a pre-exhaust movement for the barbell row, I feel like either like a scap shrug or like a face pull would be like a better, because you're at that point you're actually targeting like the rhomboids and the traps and stuff. But again, kind of keeps the lats out of it. So, interesting thought, Daniel. But maybe we'll go a different direction.
On the topic of training smaller muscle groups to their MRV or close and not having all the time to be in the gym, do you think it's a good idea to use intensity techniques quite often for muscle groups like side delts, biceps, calves, etc., if one is limited in time in their gym? So I'll answer this question really quickly. I think it's fine to use intensity techniques for any muscle that you're not interested in spending a lot of time on. I train 6 times a week, once a day, and I'm happy that I can take my big muscle groups, chest, quads, and hamstring, no problem. However, as I mentioned last week, lats, rhomboid training, etc. seems like infinity in the smaller muscle groups, and I just don't have time to take over 15 to 16 sets a week. What I've been thinking about is to employ drop sets, partials, when iso holds much more often in these muscle groups in hopes of getting extra volume, since more straight sets is just not realistic. Figure I'm not going to incur much systemic fatigue doing this stuff because these muscle groups are small and take large volumes. But even with agree, I think it's a great idea. I will say a couple of things. One, the amount of time you rest between straight sets of very small muscle groups is very small because they recover very quickly. Right, the local muscle recovers quickly anyway because they're small, but also the systemic burden, the central fatigue, the cardiovascular fatigue, and the synergist fatigue drops off really quickly. So you do a set of calves, you don't have to wait around for a minute to do another set. You might wait around for 10 seconds and be completely ready to do 5+ reps, which means it's an effective set. So that's already good news. Secondly, if you do so, a lot of the problem with the intensity technique, so to speak, is they don't let you recover quite fully. And thus, if you overdo them on the compound or some of the big muscle groups, you end up getting like your stimulus to fatigue ratio is not that great because the more of them you do, sort of the more cardiovascular and central fatigue is starting to build, and the quality of the repetitions and the sets starts to go down. This is less of a problem with the smaller muscle groups because they are so limited only by local recovery and not really central recovery or systemic recovery. So they are definitely better candidates for that kind of thing. So my advice is 2-part. One, yes, it's totally fine to do these intensity techniques to save time, but 2, why don't you just try resting the appropriate amount? You may find that the appropriate amount saves you so much time you don't even need intensity techniques much of the time. James?
I think that's a really good suggestion. And Daniel, only because of your previous question, I feel like an asshole today. God damn it.
You are an asshole today, James. You're an asshole every day.
I know. I'm just looking at the previous question, and I'm like, okay, well, you got time for gymnastics training. Why don't you have time to just throw in a couple extra sets of biceps while you, I don't know, right?
It's a priority, I guess, right? Different priority.
I get that. So, but like saying like limited time at the gym, I'm like, I don't know. But I think that the happy compromise is actually what Mike said, which is just maybe be a little bit more mindful of not taking more rest time than you need. You might just be taking more than you probably need, and you can probably add 5 to 6 sets of 5 to 6 sets of biceps.
You rest 30 seconds between each one.
30 seconds to a minute between each one. I mean, we're talking like less than 10 minutes total time doing that exercise. Not a huge deal. You could probably.
And if you want to do a drop set, those are the muscles that respond the least poorly to them. We'll put it that way.
I'm not an asshole. I'm just skeptical. Curmudgeon.
I'm not a player. I just crush a lot. All right. On the topic of going maybe 10 to 12 sets for, say, quads in one session, you repeatedly said you're skeptical of people that say they do this. Do you think this is a strength and size dependent, though? Mike, you have huge quads. You're 2, Charlie 2, that Kano guy you just wrote about IG about. You're all big, strong, and likely very fast switching your quads. But what about just a normal-sized guy? Or wouldn't you actually be skeptical if he wasn't training on the higher end of per session volume recommendation because he doesn't accrue the kind of fatigue you do? If a guy can only squat 250 for 10 or only hack squat 275, shouldn't someone like that actually do higher volumes because he can recover from it? Maybe. Wouldn't it be weird if someone came to you and said, I did 4 by 225 on the squat and 4x leg presses at 315 and I can't walk? No, because that's actually what Paul Kano just did, that literal same workout described. He couldn't walk. Wouldn't you tell them that they need to increase their cardio or something? I pick quads, but any body part applies. Am I off base here? In summary, saying larger, more faster twitch individuals, lower end of the set recommendation will have to be used, whereas someone who is smaller, medium-sized would be much better off on the higher end. So point 1, I agree with you. Yeah, lower end set recommendation, at least to start with bigger, faster switch guys they can get a lot of limited number of sets. Although the way they got that big is usually because they've been training for a long time and their trainability is very high, their conditioning or work capacity is high.
God,
so they might offset it to some extent. What?
That was going to be my point. Was going to be usually, although they're stronger, they usually have really high work capacities.
Right. But the second part is someone who is smaller, medium-sized would be much better off on the higher end. No, that's a trade-off between frequency and per session volume. So if they can really easily breeze through 8 sets and not get crazy fucked up, instead of doing 2 sessions a week, why don't you do 3? Instead of 3, why don't you do 4? That way their per session quality is fucking really high, but because they recover so well, they can do a higher frequency. So just because you can survive 20 sets per workout doesn't mean you need to do 20 sets per workout. Literature is pretty clear that much over 10 is not maybe the best idea. So I think up to 10 to 12 is totally fine, right? But I wouldn't be like, oh, you should do 15, no problem. I think they should be just increasing frequency. Where someone like Paul Condon, I'll put it to you this way. What Paul did with his quads is said, 8 sets total, 4 sets of squats or 4 sets of leg presses, 4 sets of Smith machine squats after. Paul's not going to be right for like 4 or 5 days. That's a once a week workout with another small workout shoved in there, right? So if you can just walk through that workout, I don't think the answer is to do 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 15, 16, 17 reps, I think, or sets. I think the answer is more like instead of doing 1.5 workouts a week like Paul Condon might, you might do 2.5 or 3.5 and so on and so on. And he says, I feel like I'm also stating the obvious here as I write it, and I'm slightly feeling like a derp. You're not a derp at all. These are all very interesting things. There's a lot of nuance here. I think you're completely correct that the smaller, a little slower twitch folks, especially people in a really good cardio shape and really lean, they can crank. But I think the answer for them is probably more often a higher frequency after they get much past 10 sets than it is higher per session volume, James.
Yeah, so Daniel, I think the root of the issue here is when we say we're skeptical, and it's not that they can't tolerate doing more. It's that once you get kind of past that like 12, 10 mark, we start to have questions about like how the SFR of those sessions is really going. That's more of the root of the issues. Like, are you picking exercises that are really good for that muscle group? Or is your technique individualized in such a way that it's really hurting those muscles to the best you can? So when Mike and I, when we say like we raise our kind of the people's eyebrow to somebody who says they do like 20 sets per session, the assumption is that they're doing it and they're either picking lame exercises or their technique's just not very good at the exercises that they're doing, or some combination of both of those things, right? So the 10 sets thing seems to be pretty consistent across groups. The only change there, again, being like Mike already said, when you have people who are really big and fast twitch, it might be a little bit lower. But other than that, it's probably the same, and then it becomes an issue of frequency. So it's not so much that like we don't believe that slower twitch or maybe people who aren't super strong can't do more. They absolutely can do more, but it doesn't mean that they necessarily benefit from more. And so that's kind of the issue there, is where, what is the quality of those extra sets? What is the quality of the initial sets? What are they actually doing in that session? That's where that skeptical eyebrow comes from, not the actual number. Well, I guess it is the actual number of sets, but it's like, how did they get to such a high number of sets? That's kind of the issue, right?
Yeah, it's not so often that they're just really slow twitching, doing everything right. It's unfortunately much more often that they're doing a lot of shit wrong. James and I have taken a lot of people through leg workouts over the years, and most people are just shocked after 3 sets. Like, oh, my legs feel strange. You're like, what the fuck have you been doing for fucking your whole life? You know?
Like good morning squats, you know?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, you get taught how to do high bar full depth squats, and especially full depth leg presses or hack squats. Dude, that's my standard, like, workout. If someone's like, well, I don't know, like, your methods, and do you really train hard? I'm like, come train with me. And they're like, all right, let's do quads. Okay, sweet. 4 sets of 15 to 20 rep leg presses, 1 or 2 from fail, and then 4 sets of high bar pause squats, 1 or 2 from fail. Usually people will get off the leg press convulsing or just roll off or throw up. And they're like, oh, fuck. And they're like, I have time for squats. And like, how much do you squat? And they're like, 405. I'm like, today we will begin with 185. They do 185 for 8.5 reps and shit blood. And they're like, what the fuck have I been doing in my own training? And you're like, I don't know what you've been doing. It's clearly something that was not this.
And that's the thing, like anybody can write this shit down on an Excel sheet or on a piece of paper and say, this is what you're doing today. But it takes somebody with a good coach's eye to notice if somebody's doing it in such a way that is really, really good and really stimulative, right? And that's just like from being in the gym, having a lot of experience. And obviously Mike and I have an education in this stuff, so we have a kind of an extra edge, but you don't have to have a PhD to look at somebody squatting and being like, they're getting no quads out of that. That's going to be all fucking glutes, all fucking back, right? Same thing goes when assessing, like reps from failure. How many times have you asked somebody to do like, okay, let's do 4 from failure, and they stop at 10 from failure and look at you and you're like, keep going, right? That's just like comes from being having a good coach's eye, having good experience, right? And putting somebody through a good session. And that's kind of, to be honest, that's a huge advantage of doing one-on-one personal training versus doing online coaching, unless people are sending you sets of everything that they're doing on video. You can actually watch them doing it, making sure that they're getting the most out of those sessions that you can. Sometimes when we do online coaching, I mean, unless we specifically ask them for videos or it becomes an issue, you're just kind of assuming that they're doing the right thing, but they might not be. They might be like way away from their RIR goals. Their technique might not be quite individualized in such a way. So I think that's another good mark of a good coach, where you can take something simple like do 3 sets of squats, 3 sets of leg press, and it becomes completely devastating when they were doing like 10 sets of X, Y, and Z and 10 sets of, ABC and getting nothing out of it.
Mm-hmm. I will say there's a bit of a cop-out on my part, mostly because I hate writing long comments on Instagram. But I get asked on Instagram a lot, like I'll do a squat or I'll do some kind of pull. And people say, like, this looks great. Like, this looks interesting. What are your cues? Do you have any cues for this? It seems to be something people are obsessed with, cues. A lot of times I don't, because I think, first of all, cues are fucking stupid, because nothing replaces a coach actually being there, because you can fuck up a lot of cues. And also, cueing a couple of things can throw off the rest of what you've been doing, which is totally fine. So it turns out coaching technique is quite complex. And the best cue is to show someone how a person executes a movement on video and to give them the top 3 most pertinent cues. And then if you want any more cues on top of that, what you're really saying is I need personal training because the nuance is not for Instagram, So I think a lot of people get really overkill on what kind of videos can I watch to pick apart my squat. It's like, yeah, man, you need to just go over Max Ada's training facility and pay him so you can fix your squat once and for all.
And that's a really interesting differentiation between like a lot of sport training and physique training, whereas
You
like
would never ask that in sport training. What are some cues for soccer? Like what?
yeah, and even if you're doing lifting for sport, right? There's a lot of good reasons to ask somebody to critique your technique to make sure you're doing it correctly, so it has good transfer of training, good safety, injury management stuff. But for physique training, it's like, are you actually hitting the muscle that you're trying to train? It's a much simpler question, right? It's like, okay, if you're not doing, that's mostly like a binary type answer, right? If you're like not really training it that well, like you probably need to revisit your technique.
Yeah.
So,
you know what's interesting is like very related. Sometimes I hear guys being like, hey, I tried that like feet forward Smith machine squat and I'm arching my back, my chest is up, my core is tight. I'm squatting all the way down to my heels. My feet are a little bit in front. My quads are shooting out. Like, I don't really feel my quads. Like, do you have any cues for me? And I'm like, bro, like that's literally all I got, man. You know, I have no idea. Try to fucking use your quads. It's one of those, like, I'd have to see if what you're saying is really what you're doing. Because sometimes people say stuff and you're like, that's not what you're doing. You show them how you really do it. And they're like, oh my God, my quads. Well, sometimes if people, you know, when it's a mind-muscle connection, like, I'll put you this way. I don't think they're cues for a mind-muscle connection. I think they're cues for technique. Once you have good technique, the mind-muscle connection either comes or it doesn't come, and you've got to coax it. You've got to just like fucking woosah into your own shit and be like, my lats. Ah, okay, I feel it. And some of the cues, quote unquote, are like, you know, slow the eccentric down, really squeeze at the bottom. But like, that's kind of obvious shit. You know what I mean? And it's like, I don't feel my lats in this. Like, fuck, man, I would say change your technique. Yes. And or just focus on a couple sessions of trying to feel your lats a little bit more, lighten up the weight, and try to feel them. And if you can't feel them after that, I don't know what to tell you.
At the risk of sounding like an asshole, which seems to be the trend of this episode,
that's the theme.
I think a lot of people with the cueing stuff also are shit. How do I say this? They're not really interested in lifting. They're trying to find excuses to not lift more, not do more stuff. You know what I mean? There's like a lot of people who are more interested in like just critiquing every like biomechanical aspect of what they're doing and not actually getting in the gym and training, where they're just willing to stop whatever it is that they're doing and reinvest in their technique, which is not a bad thing on paper, but they get the paralysis by analysis problem.
Oh, dude, I got the perfect example for that. I get asked, like, on pull downs, do you lock your scapulae into place or do you let them move? I'm like, what the fuck? Like, I've never thought about that in my entire life. Why would you arbitrarily lock something into place?
I pull it down all the way.
The scapula too.
I make sure I feel it in here, right?
Yeah.
And then I repeat. That's it.
It's crazy. There's people like, hey, what do you think about elbow position in the squat? And I'm like, what the fuck? We're not powerlifting, bro. Like, whatever feels comfy and you can hit your quads, you're good to go. Like, some folks are just out there on that shit.
Dude, you want to know a really funny problem I had? This is a little bit of a tangent, so I apologize, but I have a client. It's a woman. That's as far as I'll say. She had a breast augmentation, right? And so her doctor her recovery is going really well. And, her doctor gave her clearance to do lower body exercises, right? Which is good. So thumbs up. And so I was thinking like, okay, what are some movements we can do? And then I was like, okay, let's try some of these things. And I was like, we can do like, you know, simple stuff like machine stuff, like lying hamstring curl. And I was like, wait, no, that's no good. It's going to smoosh up the boobs. I was like, let's do some like leg press. Like, oh no, that's no good either, right? That's going to like smoosh up the boobs. Let's try like 45-degree back raise. And then I was like, fuck, that's no good either. That's going to smoosh up, you know, and it's not that just like touching the boobs is the problem, but like just minimizing discomfort in that area. And so I was kind of thinking about, like, I had a good thought experiment, and that's another instance where you might have to just like change the technique altogether on something just to make it work for the time being. And we were talking about optimizing, but this is more of an issue of like, I have some limitations and I still need to train. How can I still train under some set of limitations? So I was thinking like, okay, instead of using a plate, you know, use 2 dumbbells or something where you can just let the weight hang comfortably, stuff like that. But you get into funny problems like that. And it was a fun experiment for me today.
Yeah. John Howarth says, hi guys, I appreciate all the content you guys put out. I think it definitely got me headed in the right direction after a few years of seemingly spinning my wheels. Well, that's really good.
Awesome, man.
Hopefully this isn't too broad of a topic to discuss. What are some common training pitfalls when training for hypertrophy but barely seeing if at any muscle gains? Using myself as an example, I've been training for 5 years, mix of cutting and bulking, and I've been anywhere from 170 to 220 pounds. I feel like it has got to be an issue with my training. I managed to get down to 225, 315, 405 for bench, squat, and deadlift, but I am cutting now, and I'm 6'2" and only 165 pounds. I use those online calculators, which give a rough estimate of attainable LBM and height and bone size. I feel like I am still 20, 30 pounds away from something I can theoretically achieve. Because that's theoretical maximum. It's not theoretical average, and that's not even, you may be below average in your genetics. We'll get to that. It just baffles me that even though I've been up to 220 pounds, probably way too aggressive and stupid in hindsight, if I haven't gained more muscle, I'm just thinking something had to have been way wrong. I've also always been pretty meticulous at tracking macros, so I don't think diet would have been culprit outside of just taking it too far and getting too fat. I'm guessing volume, but prior to RP, it seemed like everything I read was very against high volume training, and I just needed to focus on getting strong in the big three, and the gains would come rushing in. I'm now utilizing MPT and hoping to have a successful mass gaining phase after my show in November. Thanks. John, as a follow-up question, if I may, I'm pretty sure I've been primarily strength training for the last 5 years unknowingly instead of training for hypertrophy.
Yep. That's where we're
If that's
going.
the case, even though I have been training pretty consistently, but my muscles are still maybe around beginner levels, I'll still be able to gain muscle at a rate a beginner would expect to. Listen, John, you're talking about getting like any really impressive gains at all. Let's not expect anything, okay? So don't expect to gain rate at a beginner would. Don't expect anything. Just train and eat, and you'll see, right? John, not focusing on you. You're not doing this, but some people are just really, really highly curious about what they can expect to achieve. It doesn't matter because you can achieve it or not. Like after a couple of years, you'll figure out what you're achieving. And then he goes on to say,
it's like stressing out about an exam. Like at some point, you just have to take the exam.
Just take the exam or not, yeah. Or even though I don't have much muscle, but since I've been training for 5 years, my beginner gains went down the drain. So that's definitely not the case. So let's address this. So even though I don't have much muscle, but since I've been training for 5 years, are beginner gains down the drain? Absolutely not. Beginner gains are always there for you. And to the extent that you do more correct things, you get them. So for example, if you've been massively underdosing volume for 10 years, so I have 10 years of training, there's no way I have beginner gains. You start to train for the first time ever above your MEV, short of maybe your first couple of weeks of training, you will see radical gains if you have the genetics for radical gains. Plain and simple, right? So that's definitely not a concern. James and I usually go through a checklist. Is your sleep and rest sufficient to be, to most people's average needs? Okay, because if it's not, none diet and training don't matter, and then it would make perfect sense why you are not big. So is your sleep, rest, recovery, stress, that stuff. The next is diet. So if you've consistently been eating a hypercaloric diet, seems like you've been pretty heavy, and especially if you got heavy, within a period of months, not weeks, and if you stayed around there for a while, then because if you went up to 220 over 3 months and went back down to 160 over the next 3 months, I would not expect you to gain much muscle from that. But if you've been up to weights pretty high and consistently eating a lot of food, that checks that box. And the next one is, have you been training with at least a 1 to 2 time a week training frequency? And have you been training with MEV to MRV volumes and relative intensities that are above 4 RP or 4 RIR? So put it another way is, are you training hard enough, right? You have a hole in your plan there, which means you actually violate that MEV to MRV window. So I think maybe that's the case for you that you haven't been. That's the good news. So I think you're in for some gains if that really is the case. Some not great news. Individuals who are meant to be very big do not struggle with size with any basic semblance of a program in their early years. Individuals who have really good genetics, if you put them on a strength training program, they get jacked like people with bad genetics get jacked on hypertrophy programs. Like you do 3x3 squats, deadlifts, and bench twice a week, and all of a sudden you look like sort of halfway to bodybuilder. People are like, what the fuck? That's not a good way to get big. People with good genetics get big sort of no matter what. So you probably don't have amazing genetics, is my guess, unless there's a part of this plan that we just don't know about that's missing. I think you're going to get very likely better results in training with more volume and slowly increasing your calories, slowly adding body weight. But I don't think you're going to have amazing results. And if you've been training for 5 years and you weigh roughly 200 pounds, and you bench 225, squat 315, and deadlift 405 for a max, I would say that those by normative standards put you, I suppose you pay for the truth here at RP Plus, that puts you into the below average category for strength of someone of your size. Is it still fucking awesome? Yeah, totally. Are you still going to get stronger? For sure. Are you going to get bigger? Absolutely. I just, based on my understanding of what you're going through here, I would say that you shouldn't be expecting super crazy gains to come out of nowhere because that's unlikely. And I'm very sorry for how harsh that sounds, but I'd much rather give you an accurate, what we think is a truthful analysis than tell you to just keep trying a bunch of different training methods that might finally turn you into Rolly Winkler. But I do think the volume is a very good idea to explore. I'm curious to see how that's going to help you. James?
Yeah, so that kind of, I think Mike probably had this in the back of his mind too, but that definitely confirmed my suspicion as we started reading this question. I was like, have you been training for strength and not hypertrophy, right? And that's usually kind of the root of the issue, and that seems to be the case. As Mike said, you probably aren't like the most fast twitch, like muscle jacked guy that's ever lived, and that's okay. I think that you run into a few conundrums here where your training age is not truly that of a beginner, though you can still make really, really good gains once you start switching to hypertrophy. Relatively good gains is what I mean by that. One of the downsides of having been doing strength training for that long is your MEV might be a little bit higher, whereas somebody who's like a true beginner can do like half a set and their muscle growth potentially starts taking off, which is really sweet. You are probably going to have to put in a little bit more on the MEV side and a little bit more on the MRV side just because you've been training for a while, but you'll still make good gains relative to what you're capable of. I think seeing is that your body weight was up towards of like 220. You might have just been like pushing the diet stuff way too hard, especially if your bench like didn't go through the roof. That would be an example. Like you knew you had a lot of potential where if you gained 30 pounds and your bench went up like 60 pounds, we'd be like, oh, okay, there's something there. You probably could be gaining a lot more muscle. But if it really didn't, like if you just gained a bunch of body weight and your strength really didn't go up very much, I tend to agree with Mike there. You probably don't have the best muscle gain genes out there, and that's perfectly okay. You can still make progress. So I think once you make the switch to hypertrophy training, what you're going to see now is your weight's going to be much more stable over time, and you'll start making at least some physique gains over time, right? You'll be able to keep a much tighter bound on your uppers and lowers for your massing and cutting while still seeing a net change year to year, which is right now you kind of sound like, I'm not really sure if I'm seeing a lot of change. My body weight's changing. My strength's not really changing, right? When you start switching to hypertrophy training, you're going to be at the end of the year, you'll be able to say, hey, that did something, right? And I'm not super fat and I'm not super skinny. Something good happened and I'm making progress. And I think that's probably what you're looking for at this point. Yeah. The other thing too is like, this kind of was in the previous question with Daniel. Another thing aside from the volume, but like also kind of the SFR of the stuff that you're doing. Like we get people who are doing low bar squats for sets at, for like 3x8 and wondering why they're not getting a ton of quad growth. Well, it's like, well, maybe that's not a great exercise that you're choosing, stuff like that, especially people with your background who train for strength. So I would say reevaluate the SFR of the exercises that you're using and maybe make a nice list for every major muscle group and say, hey, these are the ones that I really seem to get a lot out of. That'll be really helpful too. And then it's just a volume landmarks thing.
Yep. All right. Robert Gilashvili, who is
very Game of Thrones type name.
Yeah, well, I guarantee you, he has ancestors in Georgia, and not the Georgia Devil Soul
America,
Georgia, but the Georgia that's.
Oh, I like the way I didn't even. Very good.
What?
That song reference. I didn't know.
Oh yeah. Didn't know that I knew that kind of music.
I didn't know
Devil's music.
You didn't know you knew about that golden fiddle.
Yeah, well, you know what? I've been to plenty of bars at ETSU against my will where that song comes on and everyone loves it, and I start thinking of suicide.
Oh my God! I was watching the UFC recap from when we were in Ireland, and I was just kind of working and listening at the same time. And it was like, introducing so-and-so from Johnson City, Tennessee. I was like, what? Whoa, what? Are you serious? He got his ass kicked, but it was really funny. Yeah, I was like, whoa, that guy's from JC.
Oh, well. All right, so Robert Gilashvili, clearly somewhere from Georgia, some ancestry, which, by the way, has statistically the best wrestlers in the entire world. Their population is like 6 million, and they have like 4 Olympic gold medals. It doesn't make any sense.
That's pretty sweet.
Yeah. So Robert says, is there any validity to the idea that different grips on vertical pulls affect different areas of the lats? In my experience, I can feel the 2x shoulder width, overhand grip, 1.5 shoulder width, overhand grip, and underhand shoulder width grip slightly different areas, and everything else seems like an inferior version of me on those. Yeah, totally. It's absolutely possible. Regional activation differences are definitely a thing. And if you feel it in some areas, nobody's going to tell you that that's not working. It's almost certainly working. So just what we would say is make sure that it's an overall good exercise, because, if you have tiny lats in general, but slightly bigger outer lats, like nobody gives a shit, right? So the core basics are really good, but if you need extra volume to fill in, then I would use those specific groups for that.
Yeah, and you can see a historical context for this with bodybuilders saying, I got to hit all the angles. That's like a classic thing. I got to hit all the angles in my session, right? Because they're feeling it in different regions within the muscle, right? That's why last week or the week before, Mike was making me laugh with the flat bench, incline bench, decline bench, cable fly, like same idea, right? Where you're like, you can feel that in all the different parts of your chest, right? That's a good thing.
You just don't need to do that in the same workout.
Yeah. And you also don't want to, like Mike was just alluding to in his last comment here, you don't want to needlessly try and focus on a region if it really limits how much you can get out of the exercise as a whole, right? So if you're like, oh, I really feel like if I go as narrow as possible on these underhand pull downs, I get like this little tip on my lat. But if you just did like regular grip underhand pull downs, you feel it like all over the fucking place, right? You're probably needlessly limiting in that exercise modification. But it's totally fine to accentuate different regions with different modifications on technique.
All right. The fusion of two worlds, Sean Morikawa Rubin says, hey guys, I asked a question last week, but I think your guys' answer flew over my head.
Oh no.
But I'm still really curious, so I'll just try it one more time, but rephrased much simpler for myself. I think he's pedantically talking down to us. We fucked up the answer. I'm just kidding. A, if you pick a weight that lands you in, say, the 15 to 20 rep range on the first set, you're hitting your intermediate fibers pretty well, correct? Yeah, that would be the hypothesis.
Sure.
B, if you rested not long enough so that your next set only got 5 reps, is it essentially only the fast twitch fibers that pulled off those 5 reps? No, all fibers are activated during maximal training.
Right.
And it says because the slow intermediate ones weren't ready yet, right? No, the slow intermediate ones were active, but what the hypothesis is a very hypothetical thing. Generally speaking, slower twitch fibers may need more volume to respond to growth than faster twitch fibers, and intermediate twitch fibers somewhere between the two. So if your reps drop off real fast, your total workload over the course of multiple sets might fuck you over a little bit on intermediate and slower fibers. So there may be something to resting a little bit longer between sets, which definitely fucks your faster fibers because it just front loads a bunch of junk volume before them. But that junk volume is to some extent more hypertrophic to your slower intermediate fibers. Because faster twitch fibers are so vastly responsible for most hypertrophy, and because you use your intermediate fibers, and especially your slower ones, for just daily ambulation and movement, and that's how they stay bigger, that it really means that you can drop off anything just to 5 reps is totally fine. But if you really do feel like you get better pumps and soreness, etc., if you rest a little longer or do some down sets to keep the reps closer to that 15 to 20 initial range, that's definitely something to experiment with. So James and I would never say that you shouldn't do down sets to stay within a tighter range, like 10 to 15 to 20, and that you shouldn't rest longer so that you can have the reps go higher and get the metabolite effects, so on and so forth, get the intermediate and slow twitch fibers. What we would say is you don't have to do that. And if you drop all the way down to 5 reps between sets, it doesn't matter much. But there's no correct answer to which one works best for you. You should have to try it and see which one gives you the better stimulus to fatigue ratio in your estimate. James?
Yeah, I totally agree. And it's kind of, this particular question is kind of funny because it kind of goes counterintuitive to some of the stuff you learn in exercise physiology. Like Henneman's size principle, for example, says, okay, for, like lower power output or lower force tasks, you primarily just use your slower twitch or slower diameter muscle fibers. But that's not to say that that is what causes them to grow the most necessarily either. So they are very fatigue resistant. And because of that, although you can activate them at kind of lower intensity thresholds, you still have to do a shitload of stuff to make them grow just because they're so fatigue resistant. So it's kind of one of those conundrums where you think about like what activates slower twitch muscle fibers. It's like, well, generally lower force, lower power output activities. But it's not to say that they can't benefit from doing something like an incomplete rest protocol or just blasting them with volume.
Mm-hmm. That's why I think it's really cool when you have some applications of harder and easier training days, especially with body part focus. So for example, if you do really hard back training on one day, I'll actually give a better example. Really hard tricep focused training on one day. Monday, tricep, big triceps, a little bit of chest at the end. The next day you do mostly chest and just your triceps get hit just ancillary. You see, okay, when triceps get hit as synergists, their fastest twitch fibers probably aren't active because they're not themselves, the muscle local is not approaching failure. Like the pecs will fail first by 4 or 5 reps or something. You could say that's a bad thing, but here's the deal. When you do your hard workout on Monday, you fucking fry your biggest and fast twitch fibers, which might take a while to recover, days. But the slower fibers and intermediate fibers you also fried might very well be ready to get 100% hit super hard again by Wednesday. And luckily, they get hit very hard, just as hard as they would when you're training close to failure. They would get hit the same level of difficulty if you stop 4 or 5 reps short of failure because they still are fully active that entire time and generate full amounts of tension. So the cool thing is that as you hit chest hard and ease up on triceps, or ease up on chest, hit triceps hard, the faster fibers, basically in that scheme, get worked a little bit more rarely than the slower fibers and the intermediate fibers, which are worked much more frequently, which is a good thing because they can probably take the frequent work, whereas the faster fibers can't take the frequent work. Like if you try to train super heavy pecs 3 times a week, really close to fail, you might find yourself not being able to do that 3 times a week, but you might be able to do it twice a week, and your triceps sort of take the slack on the other day.
I have experimented with that situation exactly.
Yeah, it works really well. Number 2, recently listened to Mike on the JPS Muscle Soreness podcast. Mike mentioned the idea that the ideal scenario or close to it for hypertrophy training would be stability and performance. Potentially close to it. It's a safe bet, is what I would say. For hypertrophy training, it would be stability and performance is what increases sets over a mesocycle. James, just to recap, this means like as you overload during a mesocycle and increase sets,
Your
if
preparedness
your performance
is kind of level. Yeah.
Microcycle to microcycle, that means you're by definition accruing fitness because that means your fatigue is for sure accumulating, and for some reason you're not getting weaker. So that means you're for sure accumulating fitness. If you do less than that, less volume than that, and your performance is going up, it's good that your performance is going up, but you can no longer tell what part of that is just insufficient accumulation of fatigue or reduction of fatigue, which is bad because you could just be doing more volume and growing more, which part's actually better improvements in fitness. And I would surmise that, especially once you're advanced, the improvements in fitness due to muscular hypertrophy are almost undetectable, even on the mesocycle level. Like, how much muscle are you going to gain week to week? How many reps on your squat at 405 are you going to add from the muscle gained last week in quads? 1/10 of a rep, something like that. Like, it's not even 1 rep. So I would say that any, fitness gains you make within an accumulation phase can be restructured to be thought of as these are volume progressions you didn't take. It's fatigue you didn't cash in for probably more hypertrophy. And of course, if you do more, then fatigue degrades your performance over the course of the mesocycle's accumulation phase, then for sure you're just interfering with overload and almost certainly on the other end of the U-shaped curve of hypertrophy. So that's the background. And then he asks, would this would be different for static sets training, correct? That means you don't increase your sets throughout the meso. You would want to see performance increases micro to micro if set numbers stay the same, right? I don't think I would. If I was doing static sets training, that means I would assume that my MEV and MRV was so close together. Let's say MEV is 16 sets, MRV is 18 sets. That means I would just basically do 17, 17, 17, 17, that are IR, RIR, and let load progressions do all of the fatigue accumulating. That means I still accumulate fatigue during the mesocycle, and I still aim for roughly equivalent performance micro to micro to micro. If performance is going up significantly, again, you cannot tell which part of it is just insufficient accumulation of fatigue and or no accumulation of fatigue, even a reduction of fatigue, and or which part of it is the actual increase in the fitness characteristics. So I would stay away from any in hypertrophy. First of all, don't do static sets training. That's fucking stupid.
Yeah, that's kind of the bigger issue here.
Right. But if you do static sets training because of the fact that your MEV and MRV are so close together, I would absolutely not be aiming to get stronger the whole micro to micro to micro. Now remember, you get stronger after the deload. that's when you're supposed to reveal your fitness.
And I mean, and frankly, that's an oddly specific scenario. I don't think most people are advanced enough to really find themselves in that position, right? So the more likely problem if you're doing static sets is if you train at MEV, you might see performance going up for a couple of weeks and then it starts to plateau off. If you're training at MRV, your performance will probably start degrading within 1 to 2 weeks. And if you're at MAV, you probably are seeing performance go up, but you're leaving a lot on the table, that whole time. So that's kind of the issue you run into. And then, of course, we already said you don't want to be doing static sets for hypertrophy because you want to be either increasing your effective sets or effective reps, however you want to phrase it. Both are applicable.
Yeah. Number 3, using quads as an example here, but asking in general for all muscle groups. Say someone never squatted and only did leg press and leg extensions. Do you think they'd be able to reach their maximum quad potential, but it would take longer? And I'm not even sure it would take longer and or more sets per session to get there. For sure, more sets per session because the raw stimulus magnitude of squats is massive. Or would there be some quad growth that would never be achieved without squatting? I think there would be some quad growth that would never be achieved without squatting, but it would be teeny tiny, like a 1 or 2% difference. And you can't even see 1 or 2% on a quad if you look at it, because some fibers would be hit just for variation. These squats aren't even the exercise we need to pick. If you never did lunges, or if you never did hack squats, if you never did wider stance squats, you would miss out on some maximization of a motor unit pool in some area of the quad that the other 2 exercises don't maximize. But if you told me, like, hey, if I never squat, I only do hack squats, leg presses, and leg extensions, how much quad hypertrophy I'm missing out on? I would say it's less than 0.5% or something like that. Because I never high bar squat, but I do sumo squats, hack squats, leg presses, and leg extensions. If you're doing all those other things correctly, I'm not willing to bet you would make any noticeable change in squats. So I don't think there's anything magical about squats. They're just a very effective exercise. That is what it is. You don't have to do squats. It's just, I'll put it to you this way. If you're not doing squats, a lot of times you're doing shittier exercises. And the next question isn't to attack you and say, you should do squats. The real question is, why aren't you doing squats? And a lot of people are just like,
because they suck.
A bitch. Yeah. And you're like, okay, well, that's an interesting reason. You can certainly make up for being a little biggity bitch by doing other exercises, but maybe you got to look inside that soul and punch yourself in the fucking ovaries.
Yeah, and I think furthermore, this gets to the idea that you can't put any one exercise on a pedestal of being the best or super elite. It's just you could leave any exercise off the table and probably get the most growth that you reasonably could get within like a very marginal percentage. Really what the issue comes down to is like, what are good SFR exercises for you, right? So like, and Mike and I, every year we talk about like the squats versus knee extension example, right? It's like Mike could never do knee extensions again, ever in his life. And he's going to get as much quad growth as he possibly could get, right? Me, like squats, I can't just, my back becomes a limiting factor. My SI becomes a limiting factor. I need to do something else for fatigue management, and knee extensions are a good SFR exercise for me. So it's one of those things like you can't put any one exercise and apply it to everybody and say, you are leaving something on the table if you're not doing this. No, that does not apply. Now, there are some that I think we can just throw in the garbage more or less, right? Like your single leg BOSU squats, like that's mostly just for bodybuilding, throw in the garbage, right? But with some reasonable restrictions of your barbells, dumbbells, right?
And there's categories of exercises you don't want to leave out. Like, for example, rows. Can I get maximum back development without ever rowing? Absolutely not. Absolutely not. Notably. Well, can I get maximum hamstring development without hip hinging? No. Shit like that, right? You said, can I get best quad development with doing extensions only, never doing any kind of pressing? Absolutely not. So there is the general classes of exercises, but within the specific class, the difference between the exercises tends to be higher.
Yeah. And the reason why squat comes up is just that it tends to be a good raw stimulus magnitude and SFR exercise for most people on average. That's why it comes up that way. But just keep in mind, like that might not apply to you and people that you work with necessarily.
I've been using the RP diet to fuel my weightlifting performance for years, and RP's simple, science-based approach has been instrumental to my success. With the new RP Diet app, following RP's principles is as easy as entering my goals and schedule and choosing my favorite foods. The app builds a diet to my exact needs, reminds me to eat my meals, and adapts to my body's changes every single day and week. The RP Diet app is a huge help in my quest to become the best athlete I can be, and if your goal is to be your best, it will help you.
And he says, thank you too, as always, our pleasure. was going to say something really fucked up.
Uh-oh.
So
don't do it. We're on YouTube now. We can't say fucked
yeah,
up
I
things.
know. No, but this is, we're making fun of someone so that it works. There's a rapper, Instagram celebrity called Vicky. Whoa, it's Vicky is her Instagram.
I know. Whoa, it's Vicky.
Yeah, and she's just the scuzziest, most white, trashiest, like unbelievable, like just the lowest of the low. And she got into some
bogan.
Beef. Yeah, every hillbilly term. When she got into some beef with like a 7-year-old Asian rapper or some shit, like it was just completely insane. It was like a 7-year-old girl whose mom makes her rap.
Was this a couple years ago?
Yeah,
I think I remember.
So she put out this song. This is the most racist fucking song of all time, and she's like rhymes about eating cats and dogs. Rhyming is like a very charitable interpretation of what's going on. And then during the song, I think to start the song, she goes, "Konnichiwa, motherfucker." And I was kind of like Sean Murakawa Rubin, since he's clearly part Japanese there. I wanted to be like, "Konnichiwa, motherfucker." It's just like, you watch that song and it's like, you do realize this whole video is just you being racist against yourself. Like, you're the only victim here. Nobody takes you seriously. Unbelievable.
Oh, God. Ouch. We love learning about hillbillies with all of our travels.
That's so great.
People are like, what kind of arts and food culture do you have when they visit other countries? We're like, tell us about your trash. We want to know about who's the lowest of the low.
Where is your Kid Rock? Show us your
Kid Rock.
They're like, oh, and they usually have a street for like, oh, that's if you want to go out in this area. We're like, perfect.
Dude, Jason was like telling us all sorts of stuff we didn't know about, like Irish low life culture. It was amazing. I'll fill you in another time because it's not appropriate for this, but like we learned more than we realized was, I mean, like I have Irish family and I had no idea about some of this stuff. So it was interesting.
All right. Aiden Brown says, hi, Mike and James. Thanks for answering my questions last week about my brother's sinusitis. I have a question this week about myself. I also have sinusitis. I'm just kidding. I finished a prolonged cutting phase and have lost around 35 pounds over the course of 6 months, with maintenance phases sprinkled in. That's pretty good.
Excellent.
I'm about to go into another maintenance phase to drop all the fatigue that's accumulated and get rid of the food focus I currently have before going into my mass phase. With me now at a level of body fat that I can now consider okay to start a mass phase with slightly visible abs. I was quite overweight when I started. Okay, I would carry on, but I don't have the mental juice to carry on dieting to get down to 10%. Optimal body fat range, which is what you guys recommend. Remember, it's optimal by a small, tiny little margin. It's theoretically optimal. It's not even research confirmed.
And that trade-off is a smart trade-off.
Yes, very smart trade-off. And I'm extremely motivated to put on some real size. It's really great. After messing about in my first 1 or 2 years of training and not knowing how to train properly, I really want to put on as much size as possible going into my 3rd year of training. Now that I know all the amazing content you put out, what would be the most optimal strategy going forward for me in terms of massing, phases, mini cuts, etc.? Well, you could buy the mini cut manual book that actually describes the periodization, and the RP diet book that describes the periodization. You should. It has real awesome examples. But let's see what your plan is and see how close it aligns. My plan was to finish maintenance/active rest phase I'm doing now, then go into a 12-week massing phase and gain at a rate of 1% per month. Sounds great. Followed by a 4-week maintenance phase. After this maintenance phase, I would do another 12-week mass and be appropriate, and then a mini cut depending on the fat accumulation. So I would change 2 things. 12-week massing phase, I would change into a 16-week massing phase because I think you got 16 weeks on you on a first run. 1% per month sounds totally great. Even 1.5 is fine. Followed by a 4-week mini cut, not maintenance. You don't need a maintenance yet. And then after that mini cut, you do 12 weeks, and then you do a 2-week maintenance active rest, and then another maybe mini cut or real cut, and then you repeat the process. James, any critiques?
No, I think that's a great strategy. And one thing I've gotten into a bad habit in the past of like laying out these elaborate body composition plans for clients and people. And what I think is important too is to also allow a chance for you to reevaluate what you want to do. So I think like what Mike said, do the 16 weeks of mass is a really good start. See where you're at the end of 16 weeks. It doesn't mean that you have to do necessarily a mini cut or maintenance or anything. You can just basically look at yourself, and if you're like, I feel like shit and I don't feel good, like, am I really going to do another 12 weeks of massing after this? You don't have to, just because you wrote it down on a piece of paper and said, this is what I'm going to do. You shouldn't feel shame about that either, right? So what I would say is do the 16 weeks, plan on either doing a maintenance or mini cut to follow, one or the other. And the one that you choose is the most reflective of how you're feeling at that time. So you might decide like, I don't really feel like massing anymore. great. Do the maintenance, and then you can do a full cut later on, lose the fat, and then you can repeat the process, rinse and repeat at the desired body fat level that you want to start at. Maybe you have more juice in the tank after doing 16 weeks of massing. You might decide this time I'm going to cut all the way down to 10% or something if you wanted to. So Mike's suggestion was really great. I'm not trying to say not to do that, but I'm also suggesting just leave a little time for reevaluation in there so you can make changes based on how you're feeling in the now. It's one of those things. I'm going to butcher this. Mel always talks about, like, people always make lofty goals for themselves when life is going well, when they're sitting on the couch and everything's good, right? It's probably a better idea to make those goals when you're in the thick of it, when you're in the situation, whether it's, you're training for a marathon or you're training for body comp, whatever. When you're doing the diet, when you're doing the training, then kind of reevaluate where those goals are at and make a decision because you're in the shit. You know how it's going to feel. You know where you're going.
Yep. Excellent. Kevin Farley from Ireland.
I can't see Farley and not think of Chris Farley.
It's fucked up, man.
I know. It's so fucked. And the coffee one gets me so fucking bad. I can never stop laughing at that. Jesus.
Dildo Lover 38 here.
That's his YouTube handle, right?
Great. Just general questions to spark discussion with RP products.
Right. Okay.
Number one, do you guys have any plans of incorporating the hypertrophy/powerlifting templates into an app form similar to what you did with the RP Diet app, or included all in one bundle? I, as a user of the app and hypertrophy templates, would love to see something come down the line later on. You could easily program the app to incorporate all aspects of hypertrophy templates and more, such as metabolite training, for example, the options, drop sets, giant sets, my reps, etc. Any thoughts on this? Lots of thoughts, which are confidential and proprietary. So that gives you all the hint you need.
Bitch. Just kidding.
Oh, damn. Fuck you, Kevin. Yeah. You're like, I saw the Mike and James webinar that just insult the fuck out of people.
Mean as fuck.
For their services. Kevin, your mind is exactly on the right track, and our minds are there as well. That's all we can say for now. Number two, could we see an option down the line with the RP Diet app giving users the options to increase, decrease different macros? An example would be users getting into option to increase carbs instead of fats in a mass gain phase. I know from the past RP Plus webinars and podcasts with Steve Hall, you said you like to keep fats as low as possible, 0.3 grams per pound, I believe, when massing, so you can slam carbs for increased performance. Thanks, your pal, Kevin. Kevin, that is in fact something we'll eventually do with the app. What you do with apps is you find a core audience for your app or core customer base, and you try to do a real good job with them. And then once they're really super taken care of, you can expand a little bit to get the peripheral users that have different special considerations. For whatever it's worth, people who want to manipulate their own macronutrients are technically advanced users and technically in the vast minority of app users, because most of those people just don't use apps. I don't use a fucking app, bro. I use my fucking, people ask me if I use the RP Diet app. What the fuck do you guys think this is, man? Where the fuck did the RP Diet app come from? I use my own fucking brain. I would love to use the app eventually when it super has an advanced mode and I can configure it exactly all the fucking weird ways that I want. The thing is, most users don't need weird ways. Most users have no fucking idea what the hell they're doing. That's why they come. Like, if I had if the Spotify app, which I pay for every month, I fucking think it's great. It's a fucking music app. James, you ever get like music apps where there's like a treble and bass and whatever and all these little things, but there's like 15 of them shits and it's like line 1, line 2. What the fuck is that shit? Keep that the fuck away from me. I just want to listen to music, right? So a lot of people want simplified experience, which is what we're core working on with the RP Diet app, and it's super great. It's worked super well, and then we're slowly building out to slightly more advanced versions, and we have a design rebuild schedule for something like March or April, which is going to rework the core algorithms and introduce a couple of new really cool features, like being able to shift macros from meal to meal. I've already said too much. Don't quote me on any of this. It's on YouTube. Quote me. But yes, we're absolutely working on more advanced stuff. It's just a later priority. We want to make sure that the folks who really come to the app because they don't know nutrition and they don't fucking want to know it, they just want the app to tell them what the fuck to do so they can get in shape. We're caring for them first.
And like what we don't want to happen too is to include all this shit that's like unnecessarily hard and confusing for people who, like Mike said, have no background in nutrition. They just want to get fit and healthy for the first time.
How many macros do you want to eat? Like, what the fuck? I thought the app was supposed to tell me how many macros I'm supposed to eat.
And so like what we don't want is for like, mom who trains CrossFit 4 times per week to pick the like, oh, let's do the low fat, high carb option. Now I have to eat like 200 grams of carbs from rice. Like, no, that's not what we want. That's a select group of people who would potentially like that, but we just don't want it to get intermingled with the people who don't need it for the time being.
Yeah. All right. Andy Hodby, which sounds like a fake name if I ever heard one.
Yeah.
Just kidding, Andy.
It's kind of like Hoda Kotb.
What the fuck is that?
She's like an NBC news anchor. She's on like the Good Morning America
Bitch,
show.
that ain't your real fucking name.
Hodby made me think of Codby for some reason, but he's.
Let me admit something to you, James. You may already know this. Mel for sure knows this. I have a variety of pet peeves that are just nonsensical, and I don't take them seriously. I know. One of them, which includes myself, is people with elaborate names, like they motherfuckers trying to get credit for having a cool name.
Oh,
like
yeah.
Every time I gotta hear my own last name, like Mike Israetel. People are like, ooh, what's the origin? I'm like, fuck me. Shut up, Mike Israetel.
You know, really, what's the origin? It sounds very distinctly like the origin.
What do you think? Right? But like, they're like, Israel? I'm like, you motherfucker. It's a Georgian name. They're like, oh, fuck. I'm sorry. I got it. But like seriously, like, you know, there's like news anchors are awful at this, and folks, just this is all a joke, okay? But like news anchors are just like, you know, it's like Alana Shmela from blah blah. She's like beautiful. It's like, bitch, your name is fuck. You know what I'm saying? Your name is Jody Swanson. That's your name now. You're gonna go by a regular fucking name
American
and not
name.
some fancy shit. You know, like Finnish names are the best for this. There's a Finnish name, Ano. It's got 3 fucking letters. That's a fucking name. My name's Ano, A-N-O. You don't need a 20-letter fucking name, you asshole. Oh, here's another one. My friend Ryan Hines, he's never going to watch this, but he's a buddy of mine on Instagram. This one girl, I put down like this sort of like this joke on Instagram, and I was like, you know, people with like, if your name is really fancy, like my name is very difficult to pronounce. If you just read it, you're like, how the fuck do you say that? People who really get pedantic about it and like make sure people pronounce their names right are assholes. Like if people try to pronounce your name, they're already doing you more than a fucking service that you deserve, because you deserve dick. And this one girl gets on there and she's like, I make sure to sit down with everyone that mispronounces my name and teach them how to say it right. And Ryan goes, well, you're a fucking cunt. And he's like, he's a gay man, so he can get away with saying fuck all to women, and he just doesn't give a shit. Ouch. Can't be intimidated. So it was like, dude, but it's like, damn, bitch, you still have friends after you do this to people?
Yeah, you haven't turned enough people off. You know what gets me is the people who have like 5 names. Their name is like 5 separate names long.
Nah, you pick one, like, maybe 2.
Juan, Alejandro, Joseph, blah, 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 blah. Pick one. Done. I'm going to call you Joe.
Yeah,
done.
Your name's Joe. You're lucky you get a name. Get a fucking letter or number. Shit.
No. It got dark.
Yeah. All right. Andy Hudby says, hey, doctors, I've been a big fan of RP for a long time. I'm midway through a nutrition qualification, Mac Nutrition University by Mark McDonald, who we met in Australia, I believe, and which I would recommend. It's very good. My question is, both to do with nutrition for muscle gain are, number one, Martin really downplays the importance of calorie surplus for muscle gain, stating it can help to be at least at maintenance or in a slight surplus, but it's way down on the priorities where it's top priority in the RP diet. What's the rationale for having calories as number 1 priority for muscle gain? Try gaining muscle on a fat loss diet, and you'll quickly find out that it's nearly impossible unless you've been training for just a couple of months, or some very good genetic cases, just a few years. So if you have it at maintenance already, you're super good to go. You know, you can gain plenty in maintenance, but you will maximize gain in a slight surplus for sure. So if you want, remember the RP chart is for maximum gains. You want muscle. We want you to gain muscle the most, and that way, a hypercaloric diet is a very, very good idea. Yes. Part 2, if you're already lean, you maxed out a certain body weight, like you're a lean 165, you're getting dick in a fucking deficit. You're getting dick in a fucking maintenance, because you're not just going to go from being 10%, 8% fat at 165 and to gain muscle to be 4% fat. That's a nonsense. That'll just never happen. You have to gain weight. The centrality of the caloric surplus at some point in your evolution to get the most muscle you can is critical. I think the reason Martin, I don't know why he downplays it. I think one of the reasons he downplays it, he's training you to be a personal trainer type of nutritionist. Most of the clients you have in, there's so much goddamn body fat, and they don't have a fucking problem eating a lot anyway. That's their problem, is they eat too much anyway. So if a woman comes to you, just 45 years old, she says, I want to gain muscle, you can actually put her on a diet that drops her weight and gains muscle at the same time. You're not just gonna be like, all right, lady, time to start smashing huge M3K protein shakes. Like, nah, right? She doesn't need that shit. But for someone to maximize their muscular potential, if they're already lean and well-trained, the caloric surplus is non-negotiably the most important factor in muscle gain.
Yeah, and Mike nailed it. But I think it's probably easy. So the question was like, what's the rationale for choosing calories as the most important thing? I think a better question is, what's the rationale for not choosing calories as the most important thing? And in that case, it's because of training age. That's really what it boils down to. When you're working with beginners and intermediates, you can make lots of gains at maintenance calories. Sometimes you can even make them in a deficit, like Mike already said. But once you get to that late intermediate and advanced stage, especially if somebody is really pushing their limits of their body composition, there's nothing as powerful as calories. And this is the rationale is, I mean, hundreds, if not potentially thousands of papers and research that's looked at this and just shown, like, if you eat more, you're going to very likely gain muscle, even if it's not the right balance of timing and type of foods and macronutrients, you're still probably going to gain muscle at some point, right? So I think the rationale is more of kind of the training age context of who you're working with. When it's beginners and intermediates, yeah, you don't always have to be in a calorie surplus, but once you move on to competitive sports and people who have been training for 10 years or more, there's no way around it, unfortunately.
Yep. Number 2, he also puts total daily protein as less important than protein spacing, i.e. space stimulation of MPS via protein bolus, stating that having better spaced protein feeding is a side effect of higher total protein intake is what gets the results, not the higher daily protein intake itself. To my mind, it's impossible to get spaced feedings of protein big enough to stimulate MPS without hitting your daily total protein, so it seems to be going the wrong way around. Conversely, if you get your total daily protein in one go, you will get better results than someone who spaces their protein feedings, the bolus being large enough to stimulate MPS, but is below their total daily requirement. What are your thoughts? Well, this has actually been directly researched. They've researched a number of different feeding frequencies on anabolism, and it turns out that roughly between 2 and 6 meals a day, and precisely between 4 and 6, there's no fucking difference. But every time they research the amount of total daily protein, they find that if you don't eat enough, you pay a very, very big price. So I think by definition, total daily protein intake is more important. There is an exception to that, which is if you have 180 grams of total protein, which is, let's say, your optimal intake, and you have it for one meal versus 160 grams of protein, but you have it in 4 evenly spaced meals of 40 grams of protein, you're going to grow way more muscle in that second condition than the first, because you really fucked up the protein timing. So if your protein timing is relatively normal, optimizing that timing is not going to be worth as much of your time as if your protein intake is relatively normal. Optimizing that will give you much more muscle gain.
Totally.
Said, hopefully I've represented Martin's positions fairly here, not trying to start beef. Oh, there we already have beef with Martin. Fuck that cat and British ass motherfucker.
No.
JK, he's great.
He's great.
Anything he says is music to my ears because he has the most ridiculous British accent ever. And it's just poetry.
And his positions on stuff are very good and very reasonable as well.
Yeah, and he's usually, if he's one of those folks in the industry, one of the few, when he speaks, we take everything he says seriously, even if we don't agree with it. There's a bunch of people like that. Of course, like Eric Helms, Schoenfeld, et cetera, blah, blah, blah. But like folks like Menno, Menno will say some wacky shit every now and again, but I've never heard Menno say anything wacky that I wasn't like, ooh, I'm going to give that at least a second thought. Right? Where some people like, they're like, what do you think about what Athlean X said? I mean, shut the fuck up. Shut up. Athlean X. The fuck is that? That's the most spammy name ever. You might as well put a Z in there too, like for extreme. Why isn't extreme his name? Well, I guess it is X. Jesus.
Remember the Australian guy that was citing basically like guys who had big muscles as being mostly inflammation?
Yeah.
That guy was amazing.
Protein. He's great. The banana guy. Mm-hmm.
Banana. It's all inflammation, mate.
Yeah. All right. Metal Paul says, hey, docs, I'm very curious on the answer to Jimmy Hacker's question. Last question, too, is I'm one of those doing 10-plus sets for quads alone on leg day at the tail end of a meso. Oh, cool. So we gave that answer pretty well. And then he said, in regard to the Instagram post with Kanu, do you have any general tips to sharpen up your quad training? Well, if you look at if you listen back to our cues discussion, God damn it, the answer is no. I've never had the feeling I couldn't walk after a leg session in the gym. Remember, you don't need that feeling to gain size.
But if you never get there, it also begs the question, what are you doing? Totally. Like you should get there at some point and then be like, ooh, something worked, right? That was good, but maybe I need to tone it back for next time a little bit.
Yeah, so let's see. How can we get you to not walk? Push it to the max. Come closer to failure. Narrow your stance and lower it on the leg press and then the hack squat, and then you're squatting, narrow your stance. Stay very upright. Get a full range of motion. Get really close to failure, and do sets in a rep range you're not used to. Specifically, quads really seem to get trashed in the 15 to 20 set
Damn it.
range.
Beat me again.
Yeah, got you one more time. Turns out we both know a lot of the same shit. First set in the 15 to 20 rep range. Like, a lot of people will do a lot of 8s, and they're like, I don't want to feel all fucked up. People will do 15 to 20 reps and just have convulsions in the quads. They can't help themselves, and shit's all going awry. So I would do those 3 things, and I think you're on. I'll put you this way: if your leg press and squat technique is really good and really, really puts a lot of stretch on the quads for range of motion, if you're getting close to failure, if you're doing lots of sets and not resting like hours between them or something, and you're getting really crazy pumps, and if you're doing this with the rep ranges that tend to have the best results for quads, at least in the short term, if you say, I'm not feeling it, what else should I do? Like, literally, I got nothing for you. I would have to see you in person.
Yeah. Mike already hit the point that I wanted to hit on, but I was going to say, use those higher rep ranges. A lot of people just train quads like 6 to 8 reps, and they're like, meh. And it's like, well, yeah, you're just doing strength training at that point for your quads, or you might want to just think about bumping it up and using exercises that are conducive to that range as well. Changing things up. Like, people give Mike a lot of shit for using the Smith machine a lot, but Smith machine's a good way to actually make sure that you're using your quads on the squat and not just oofing it up with your lower back or your glutes a lot, which is something that I would do. So sharpen up your technique, individualize your technique, use those higher rep ranges, and also just make sure you're not resting needlessly long. That's one thing that's helped me out a lot too with my quad training. I was the most guilty of taking like 10 minutes between sets, doing sets of 8 for quads. Mostly just ended up like getting a back workout instead of a quad workout. So don't do that.
Don't fucking do it.
Don't fucking do it.
All right. Bassam. I can't believe I'm saying that. Bassam Imadi.
Hey, that boy Bassam, he sure got some questions.
Man. Says, hey, Jamie and Mikey, the cutie doctors of the big muscle buildy build.
Oh, God.
Okay, so if we had one of those, what's that called, James, where the airplane has the gauge? If we had a gauge for inceldom, that shit just hit the fucking red real quick, and then like we could read all of your shit you write it like incel, right? Totally. So that was up there. It is I, the man, the guy, the dude, definitely read incel.
Just digging himself a hole here.
That's it, incel hole.
Incel hole.
How are you guys doing over there in Dublin? That's actually probably how they say it. The seminars must have been amazing. I wish I could be there. Bassam, we hope to meet you in real life one day as well.
Yeah, and thank you. The seminars went really well. Ireland's an awesome place to visit. Everyone's super nice, super accommodating.
So awesome. Nice, and so drunk at night.
Yeah.
First off, I want to say that I'm just about to finish my last overreaching week of my first ever actual legit mesocycle on a gaining phase of the physique templates. Here's how it went. My eyes actually started to tear up from the pain of doing 7 sets of leg curls. Oof, at 1 RIR after a ton of other leg work. I fucking love it.
You're just a baby. What are you, crying?
Yeah.
You fucking girl.
Your tears are not anabolic. You're literally losing protein. You've been losing your own tears.
I'm going to bottle it and make an intra-workout drink with it.
Yeah. James, we need to have Marcos on here once a week. Or sorry, once a month for sure. I already talked to him. He said he's in. So we could just do like, hey folks, we're gonna answer your real questions, but then Marcos is gonna come here and just make fun of you.
Oh my God, that'd be amazing. That sounds great. We're just giving you shit, but that sounds great.
That sounds really good. I've also been having fun with picking the low-hanging questions on your Instagram's comments. I love it. Bassam, you're doing a goddamn public service, really a private service for me, and a service for the community, I will say. So Bassam's on there like answering the low-hanging questions. He answers most of the questions really, really well. Because it's the question that I've answered like 1,000 times, and Bassam's like, he tags it, he's like, I got this. The reason Mike Arches is back in the squat is it doesn't fucking matter. Chill the hell out. He goes, I find it actually really helpful for myself as I find myself learning as I explain. Totally.
Yeah.
So I have fun getting rid of me. Please stay, for the love of God, don't go. And yes, Mike, I will start posting stuff on my Insta, so don't you worry. Yeah, so I followed him on Insta. I followed Bassam, and I'm like, motherfucker has no posts. I'm like, again, incel shit is off the fucking chain there. So
I don't post much either, so I'm with you.
You're up on that incel shit too.
I know.
The fucking thing applies to everyone, right?
Just fat cats.
I'm going to regurgitate sweet science stuff and probably do body positivity for all the disordered athletes that need it. And to help myself.
God. Awful.
Body negativity. That's what we need. I have 3 questions. 1 training related, 1 nutrition, 1 general question for Mike. incel. And then my rebuttal, Mike's statement about my name, Spicy. Wow.
Oh.
Okay. I like how they use your spicy term, James.
I know. It catches on quick.
Yeah. First question then. The days after training my quads, I have soreness, which makes me walk like a fucking penguin, where I have to lock out my knees before my foot hits the ground when I walk. I notice, however, if I just stick through the pain and try to walk normally, after a while, the soreness kind of disappears. I'm not sure if that's a good thing. It's a neural thing. Your nervous system gets used to a base level of pain and doesn't detect it anymore. I'm concerned the reduction of soreness by walking is like trying to get rid of your soreness by using the muscle, which in turn will potentially blunt the soreness and MPS in that muscle. Should I worry about the soreness becoming milder induced by walking? No. There's actually an analgesic effect that's very good. Probably increases your muscle growth because it pushes blood through that area, increases recovery. Or should I just not care and move to Antarctica and continue my penguin life? That's always not a good idea. Penguins are fine animals. So.
No, and this is the reason why those things can blunt the muscle effect, because it stops it downstream, right? It's the problem is when it really starts to blunt some of the inflammation from occurring in the first place.
Yeah.
Right. And that's when you can really start to see decreases in MPS. But like Mike said, that's just an analgesic thing. It's more of just like a psychosomatic thing. You just don't notice it really anymore. It's not actually down regulating muscle growth. It's not actually removing any of the inflammation that's going on. You might be getting a light active recovery just from moving around, pumping blood, removing some waste. But I mean, what's the alternative also? Like, you're just not going to walk. You're going to Professor X your way around. I don't think that's an option. That would be sweet, though.
That would be sweet. Professor X is the man. Second question. Now that I'm approaching my deal a week, does the carb distribution throughout my 5 meals even matter at all anymore since I'm on maintenance for a week? No. I've been sticking with the RP diet recommendations and they've been serving me well, but now I don't think it's necessary to have 20% carbs pre and 30% workout since my workout is literally just MV. And 2, I'm maintaining. What the fuck will the extra, if any, tiny benefit do? Make me maintain harder? I just take Viagra if that was the case. Yeah, that's what's up. We're not saying don't take Viagra.
I think really just don't load all of your carbs into 1 or 2 meals. I mean, that would be the only thing really. Yeah. But even then, it's probably not a big deal. But
cares? Yeah, sure. Third and last question for Mike. Oh, Jesus Christ, this is a bit offensive. All right. For some background, I know for a start about your view on leucine threshold and refractory period. I feel somewhat confused as I've heard conflicting opinions / theories from Jordan Feigenbaum. If I understand him correctly, he mentions that the refractory period is quite an important thing and should be what your meal timing should be based on, since MPS cannot be triggered again until the refractory period is over, and then ingesting protein within that period will only be oxidized as fuel and does not contribute to MPS. I disagree with him to a point, since research carried out in various situations. He also mentioned the body of science, not the porno. Body of science is a great porno. Isn't clear enough to be carried out in practice, which is what Jordan seems to be trying to recommend, seemingly, yes. I feel like this two-sided information can be confusing. Can you see yourself having a discussion with Jordan Feigenbaum someday on this matter? Sure. Yeah, that sounds fine. I think it would be Steve Hall. Steve Hall is the man to tell that. Tell Steve Hall. I think it would be awesome if we could all get closer to truth on the topic, even if it's not that much. I totally agree with you. So remember, the leucine threshold stuff really falls apart. It's visible in protein research in the laboratory when they give boluses of exclusively amino acids and then watch what happens. Problem is, imagine you eat a Chipotle burrito. Do you know how slowly that protein leaches into your blood? It's not a spike. It just goes like this, right? And then you eat like eggs and toast and oatmeal. It goes. So as you eat like 4 or 5 times a day, your amino acid levels in your bloodstream are almost static, right? People gain muscle like that, though, so it can't be that big of a deal. And I don't know anyone that just has boluses of whey and then doesn't eat anything all day that doesn't lose a lot of muscle because just too few calories. There's no way around it, James.
Mike, why are you ducking Jordan here? You just want to hide behind your Steve Hall shield of security?
Smarter than me.
Why don't you get Lyle McDonald to mediate this discussion?
That would be great. Be like, Lyle, I know we've had our differences, but can you host a debate in which you're not participating?
Yes, that's what we need to see. Get you and Jordan with Lyle mediating. Don't have Steve Hall doing it. He's just going to be on your side.
I don't think either Jordan or I would agree to that. Yeah, we would for comedic purposes. All right. I've met Jordan in real life. He's a cool fucking cat. He's Jewish, which is definitely a problem. But he's
also has a very difficult name to deal with.
Feigenbaum. Like, come on, you're Feig. Jordan Feig. The Baum is too much. All right. That's all I had for today. Now, lastly, I need to address you two calling me out on fucking with y'all when it comes to my name. So, yes, I hear you and see where you're coming from with how my name should be pronounced. And yes, the hillbilly pronunciation of my name is correct. Yes, you're also right that it's an Arabic name, but funny enough, in Arabic, it's actually spelled B-A-S-M, which means smiling. That's pretty sweet. What a happy, hippie world I am, right? The I is virtually non-existent, but it's pronounced with a smaller I in English. The emphasis and accent is therefore on the first half of my name. That makes sense. If it was not, then my name would be spelled Basim. Ah, good point.
So that's like how I would have how I read his name. Basim. That's what I would have thought.
Which it's not, because that's not even a word nor a name in Arabic. Motherfucker, you don't know if that's not a name in Arabic. Would you know all of Arabic? You know every Arabic name.
Shows you how much I know about words and or Arabic. I don't know nothing about words.
Also, Mike, don't bring me that Russian crap, LOL. I would love to let you know that I'm, in fact, born in Moscow, Russia, and speak Russian fluently, and have my Russian version of my name on my passport in Russian, Basim, still emphasis still in the A. No, it's not. We do Vadim. Okay, now we're speaking Russian. We don't say Vadim, we say Vadim. Все русские Basim, тебя Basim называют. Ты знаешь это.
I think you just got out Russia alpha on the webinar.
I know, man. There's no way that shit's true, man. It's Basim, fucking 100%.
Oh no!
Listen, we're gonna do a fucking survey of Russians. We're gonna show them your name spelled in Russian. How the fuck do you say this? Basim. Every fucking time. Maxim, Vadim, Basim, блядь. Понимаешь? Все. Anyway, I hope you get that. You better know Russian, because
this is like the ultimate battle of like we have the Russian Jew and the Russian Arab.
Sweet, man. This is great. Love it. In reality, we're both just Russian pieces of shit. Russia really colors that one. I'm like, I'm a Russian Jew. He's like, I'm a Russian Arab. And a third person's like, so you're Russian? Like, yeah.
Yeah. We're just all Russian.
We have mob connections. In conclusion, I now learn that I'm pedantic about the pronunciation of my name and should get therapy. That's very pertinent to what we talked about. In the end, it's still up to you to call me whatever you want, LOL. Thank you guys for answering my questions in advance and taking your time. Yours sincerely,
Basim. Right?
Basim.
Basim, like a bass, like a fish?
That's what he said last time, man.
All right.
We need another clarification.
Basim. He did clarify. I just forgot. I just can't remember.
Basim. I'm calling you Basim because that's your goddamn Russian name. I don't give a shit what anyone says. I'm playing with you. I'll call you whatever you want. All right. Now we go. Is there anything live stream? No live stream?
No, and that was my bad. We talked about doing it on Thursday, like you and I did, and then I forgot to email our web guy who would have sent the RP Plus email. So that was my bad.
Good news, bad news, James. We have to do 3 YouTube questions per our promise. So I have found those. And if you don't mind, I can start now. Cool?
Yeah, let's do it.
All right. I'm going to pick these more or less at random. So let me scroll around. Necruno.
Oh, I thought it was going to be Necro something.
That'd be so sweet. Yeah. Necruno says, YouTube question. Which script do you think is better for hypertrophy? Number 1, in which we divide the trained muscle parts equally each day. Chest, 4 sets, shoulders, 4 sets, hands, 4 sets, back, 4 sets, legs, 4 sets, so 6 times a week. Number 2, in which we train muscle parts every 2 days with 2 times greater number of sets, but giving her a rest day while maintaining weekly volume. 1, 3, 5 chest, 8 sets hands, 8 sets legs, 8 sets. Okay. So on and so forth. Thanks. That's a really good question. I think you want to avoid 2 things. You want to avoid dipping below a muscle's minimum effective volume. So if you have like one situation, like one day of the week in which you do 8 sets and another day of the week in which you do 2, because it's just not really clear to you what you're getting out of those 2, and definitely 4 and 4, or sorry, it was 10 total. 5 and 5 would work better, right? On the other hand, you want to stay away from excessive volumes, right? If you do 1 set one day and 19 sets the other day, clearly 10 and 10 would have been better, because the 19 sets is over what is maximally adaptive. So you definitely want to, on average, stay within that middle ground, because the frequency is the same here, right? So you want to stay in that middle ground of volume. But I think James and I have numerous times described the case for some degree of pulsatility, actually earlier in this very podcast, or whatever webinar, what the fuck this is called. So early in this webinar, we described the case where basically, like triceps, you're training super hard one day, easier another day, super hard another day. And that might attend to some of the different fiber types, fractions of fiber type. So I think my guess as to what would be the very optimal, if I had to guess, and this is very much a guess, is something like 5 sets, 3 sets, 5 sets, 3 sets, 5 sets, 3 sets would work a little bit better than 4 sets, 4 sets, 4 sets, 4 sets, and a lot better than like 8 sets, 2 sets, 8 sets, 2 sets, 8 sets, 2 sets, shit like that. James?
Yeah, that's a really good explanation. I also think it's also good to not arbitrarily set like just days for recovery timelines, because each muscle is going to be kind of part of the other question was like, should you just wait?
Eric Helms is huge on this. So recover as much as you need, not just
recover as much as you need. And so you can kind of pre-plan it based on your experience, where like, okay, I know my delts, I can train 5 times per week. So that means like I might only need 1 or 2 rest days for delts. And then I'm training delts basically every time I train. Whereas other ones, you might pre-plan like 1 or 2 times per week, like hamstrings. And then many others, like Eric Helms has basically advocated for an auto-regulatory basis, where you say like, once I feel like I'm ready to do an overloading session again, I just do. And I don't necessarily have to pre-plan it. I can just auto-regulate it. So that's another pitfall that you can fall into. So I think between those two, we got that one.
Yep. All right. So next question is HM says, should volume from compound lifts contribute towards both primary and secondary movers? Example, you're running a mesocycle beginning at MEV and ending slightly at MRV. You're overloading each microcycle by adding sets. The amount of sets added each microcycle is calculated for each muscle by the following: end of mesocycle sets goal for muscle, aka MRV, plus a little extra, minus starting number of sets on the first microcycle divided by the number of microcycles. So hold up a sec. That's an approximate value that tells you roughly how many sets you can expect to add at every microcycle, but the details of that are auto-regulated every single microcycle. Sometimes you may add 0 sets. Sometimes you may take a mini deload. Sometimes you may add 3 sets where you plan on adding 2. So remember, it's not that formulaic, but that formula does give you the rough slope of what you would expect to add.
And I mean, it's fair to say that you can consider any compound movement, that whatever it is, like a bench press, like, is that volume of bench press contributing to not only chest, but maybe your anterior deltoids and your triceps? Yes. How you calculate that is really on an individual basis, because you could just not calculate it at all and auto-regulate those muscle groups anyway, and you're good to go. If you always have a pressing movement, whether it's an incline or a flat press or whatever, ends up being a wash over time, no matter how you split it. Some people are big on using the fractionals. Like they'll say, okay, this counts as like a 1/3 of a tricep set. Either way. So the point is, like, is whatever you do, as long as you do it consistently and your training doesn't change super drastically over time, in that like you're not doing heavy compounds for certain muscle groups at all when you normally would, it's a wash. You can do it either way. And really it's just an auto-regulation issue at that point.
Yeah, I actually think you answered this question, but let me finish the question here. For simplicity's sake, we'll use one lift for muscle group: back movement, cable row, biceps movement, curl. Let's say you're due to increase your back volume by 5 sets per microcycle, and you're due to increase your biceps volume by 3 sets per microcycle. That's very, very rough estimates. If we allow for the cable row volume to contribute towards our biceps training as well as our back, it would no doubt, which it no doubt it does in the real world, we would very quickly find that the rate of back volume increase would cause the biceps training volume, as a side effect of biceps being secondary movers in a row, to outpace the schedule rate of volume progression for the biceps. So because we've added sets to our cable rows to meet the schedule volume increases for our back,
can I
we
pause?
have to maintain or reduce sets of...
So that's a good thought, but you've in that analysis, your calculation is automatically wrong, because in the previous mesocycle, you didn't account for the back volume affecting your bicep volume. So you're automatically making an incorrect assumption there. It's a good thought, but you're using right now and then not, it's apples to oranges.
Standalone MRVs versus integrated MRVs for full body. We may have to maintain or reduce sets compared to current last week if you want to stay within the desired volume incremental increase for biceps. So there's 2 problems. One, we didn't account for the back volume integrated into the total MRV. Problem number 2 is where is really, really showing why the auto-regulated method is 50 times better than going up by a certain plan. So basically, the real question you have to ask is, am I getting enough lat stimulation and back stimulation? If no, add sets for back. Then you say, okay, how are my biceps doing? What's the stimulus to fatigue ratio there? If I need more stimulus, I do more curls. If I get a lot of stimulus from these rows, maybe I don't need to add as many curls as I thought I might have to, right? So it's just individual muscle by muscle. Use compound movements to do most of your volume, and then you titrate in the isolations, a little bit more pullovers for just lats, a little bit more curls for just biceps to fill in the specific muscle needs.
And always do it consistently, however you do it. That's kind of the thing here. So if you count fractionals from back into your biceps, always do it that way. So the problem that you described in this situation is where you were not counting them. You made an MRV, MEV estimate for a muscle group, and then you started counting them as fractionals in the next one, and then you ran into a problem where one progression interfered with another. That should not happen if you are using the same method across mesocycles.
Yep. All right. Last one. Chris Bickley says, I love these webinars. Thanks for all the content you provided, RP. I work at a garden center, at a garden center. Sorry. I thought garden center was like a huge, what's that called? Like some kind of Madison Square Garden type of thing.
Or like how they speak in Europe where they're like, I work at garden center.
Like, what the fuck is that? 4 days a week, and was wondering how working manual labor job affects the amount of volume/intensity I can do. There are busy and quiet times, but even in the quiet times, I'm on my feet and moving around. I usually get at least 12,000 steps a day. When the quiet period's up to 20,000 in the spring. That's nice because that's when the plants are blooming. I feel like I have everything taken care of outside of work, sleep, good nutrition, no stress, I'm training. Does my job affect the volume intensity I can do? Yes.
Yes.
Will I have to take into account that my job needs a recovery time, therefore not going too high volume or intensity? Yes, through auto-regulation. If you're good to go, you're good to go. If you're tired, then you need to auto-regulate for that and realize that you can't do more than you can recover from. Any advice on how to combine training with manual labor job would be appreciated, as I do not see much advice on the subject. So a couple of quick recommendations, and I'm sure I'll miss a bunch, so James will fill it in. One is do your hardest training when you're the most fresh. So don't do legs on Friday night when you're fucked up from a week of work. Do them Sunday morning, right? And then do upper body the rest of the week, and then do legs again Tuesday morning, right? Sunday morning, Tuesday morning, and then it's totally good because then you're basically just very, very, you don't have to suffer the week's worth of fatigue. You can do it at the best times. And another really good point here is do your really heavy, super difficult work on Sunday morning, and then your lighter, higher rep stuff on Tuesday. And that way, what ends up happening is your work really just doesn't impact your legs at all. Because you're walking around 12,000 steps, it's going to hit your legs. Your upper body is going to be very comparably easy to train. And then he says, P.S. I train on the 3 days off from work, not up to training after a hard day of work too much. So you already got the number one thing. And if you do train after work, just take some time, some caffeine, really get your shit together and go. Don't just fall out of work and into training. Gino.
Yeah, that was really good. I would say, if you really have lofty physique goals, you might want to get that up from 3 days, maybe up to 4, maybe and more. If that's not conducive to your schedule, that's totally understandable. What I would say is try to see if you can train your upper body on work days if you can. I know legs is probably going to be out of the question if you're already saying you're too tired. And then doing, like Mike said, maybe Sunday morning when you're more fresh. Another thing to keep in mind is that you might have to choose less axially loading exercises just to keep a nice stimulus, because you might find that just being on your feet all day. And if you're working at a garden center, I'm going to assume that means you're loading bags of soil, plants, bricks, wheelbarrowing things back and forth.
Dead bodies. It's
right?
Halloween.
So one of the things that's going to catch up with you, but before you realize it, is the axial loading and the systemic fatigue that comes with that. So you might find yourself relying less and less and less on things like squatting and deadlifting, and more and more on things like leg pressing, or even just doing knee extensions, 45-degree back raises, stuff like that. Things that aren't putting a huge axial load throughout your system. And you could apply that to your upper body stuff as well. So that would be an easy one to watch out for. It might also be good, if you're another reason why you might have a good incentive to actually train on your work days. I know this sounds ass backwards. Hear me out. Is so that you could actually have rest days when the weekend comes. Like you have very distinct rest days. Because if you're just training on the days like Friday, Saturday, Sunday, that means like you're doing physical labor all through the week on when you're working, and you're doing physical labor on the weekends when you're working out, and you really don't have a true day where you get to kind of rest. Now your body will acclimatize to your daily workloads, so it's not a huge deal, but it might actually be in your benefit to have some training days that are on your work days, and then having some very, very distinct no activity type days to recover a little bit better. And then one last thing that just kind of came into my mind, you said that there are clear seasonal trends in your job, which is actually kind of awesome, because then you can periodize your training to accommodate those trends. So you have much, much harder periods of training, like your really, really hard hypertrophy training when your job stress is generally low. And then like in the spring and the summertime, when people are wanting to be outdoors and enjoying their gardens and coming to the garden center, you might just do more like maintenance style training, just kind of keeping the gains that you have made and not going super, super hard in the gym. That way it's not crushing you all the time. That would be something that I would entertain, absolutely. And it's something that you would do with other kind of people who have seasonal trends, like firefighters, for example, police officers. Same idea. Like there are times throughout the year when their activity goes up and down with this change of seasons. So too would your training potentially, and make it easier on the harder times and vice versa.
Damn, James, beat that one to death.
Oh, cool.
I'm a dog.
Those are fun. Those are kind of fun lifestyle questions, because then it's like it's more of a problem. You have to kind of problem solve. Like it's not a matter of like optimality. It's like, okay, you have some shit conditions. Like how do you kind of manage it?
Let me ask you a question, James, to sort of wrap this up. If you had to eat a piece of shit the size of your fingertip, how would you do it? You can mix it with any amount of food. It's just reasonable, like a bowl-sized food, not like you can't spread it over 20 meals.
I was going to say, can you like wrap it up in a pizza and like...
Maybe you could wrap it up in like a slice or two.
Dude, you gotta just, you know what is like the most powerful taste in the world is Lucozade. You put that shit, you put that turd in a Lucozade, and blend it up. By the way. European Gatorade. It's the most glycemic thing ever. You won't even notice that turd is in there. All you're gonna taste is that sweet Lucozade. You're gonna chug that shit down. It's gonna be amazing.
Yeah, I would do some kind of really strong drink and just do basically like a big shot of the shit in the drink. And then do it. Actually, no, I'm cheating. If I get a chance to wait for the shit to dry out, or even if it doesn't dry out, I would take it.
You can't desiccate it. No, you can't.
Okay, fine, it's not dry. Fine, it's not dry. I would break the piece of poop, like if it's the size of your pinky, I would break it up into 4 pill-sized things, like mash it together and just fucking pill drop it, dude. I can fucking, you know what I'm saying? It's not
yeah. You could do like a little dumpling, right?
Easy.
Dude, that's gross.
Love it. I'm eating shit tomorrow.
Transplant.
Yeah.
All right, that's it for this. We should be back on I think the normal schedule. I'm around next week. Are you around?
Yeah.
Okay, so we should be back on the normal schedule. Sorry for being a little bit off this week. That'll be Tuesdays at 7:30 Eastern U.S. time, 4:30 California U.S. time. Please keep sending in your questions. These were some really good, thought-provoking questions this week. We really appreciate you guys and hope you enjoy seeing us on YouTube.
Yeah. Hey, real quick, James, before I let you go, do you want to hang out this weekend? I'm in California.
Are you really?
Yep. I'm shooting videos with Chad Wesley Smith, new hypertrophy shit, and I'll be in the Orange County area all day Saturday, and maybe Saturday evening we chill.
Yeah, that sounds good. Mel's going to be gone, but we can hang out for sure.
Time to get wild.
Bachelor night.
Like fast forward, you're just vomiting in a gutter, and Chad and I are standing around. We're like, well, there's Bachelor night.
Vomiting like while Justice League is playing in the background. Like, man, James went hard tonight.
That sounds good. All right. See all of you guys later.
Peace.